Okay, so let's continue forward and build out our form. So let's make a div here where we're going to put our form in. We're going to have a class name. We're going to do card, and we're going to add a padding MB2 over here, and we're going to change the opacity a little bit. So I'm going to do style. You're going to see why this looks better later on. Opacity. I'm going to go 0.9. Okay. And again, like I don't want to get too deep in it. Essentially, opacity can change the transparency of what we're looking at based on what it's overlapping. So this is based on 100%, 100% ratio. So 0.9 will be 90% overlapping, whereas 0.1 will be just 10%. Anyway, you don't have to know so much about that. Really, not for blockchain. Really, not right now in this course. But you can look into it. And we're going to see it in action soon. So I'll show you more once it's up and running. And in here, we're going to create a form where we're going to have our onSubmit button. And that's it for now. We'll just do a form and we'll give it a class name for padding of 3. And we're going to make another div in here. And we're going to have a style. Style equals border spacing 0, 1 EM. And again, this isn't out of thin air. I've done this before, so I'm just putting back, I had to work on it to come up with the dimensions here to get them how I wanted to. So that's how I'm writing this out. And now we're going to add some labels in our forms because we can bring in labels. So we're going to say label over here. And we're going to have a class name. Float. We're going to float it to the left. It's going to have a style as well. We're going to say margin. No, we're going to do border spacing. Actually, we're going to do margin to the left, 15 pixels. Okay. And then we're going to make it bold. So we're going to bring in B like that. So we can bold in it. And what are we going to write here? Well, this is our label. This is going to be our label for our label to stake tokens. So we're just going to write stake tokens. Okay. So there it is. Okay. And then under our label, we're going to make a span. Okay. And our span is also going to float to the left. And we're going to have a style as well. And it's going to be a margin to the left of, we'll do 8 pixels. Sorry, we're floating this to the right. Margin to the right. And what's this going to be? This is going to be our balance, right? That's why we're floating this to the left and we're floating this to the right. So just so you can visualize this, maybe it can make sense to you here. Essentially what we're doing, or we're saying here, is that we're going to have a form, and then basically the form is going to be wrapped as a card. So we put the form in this div, right? The form has this spacing. It's got some border spacing. Now in the form, we have a label. All the way on the left side, it's going to say stake tokens. That's where we're going to be staking our tokens, right? So we're going to have an input box there where we can say how much we want. We didn't create that yet, but we're going to. And that's going to go all the way to the left. That's why we float to the left, okay? And that's a way of actually positioning with CSS. It's a style so we can position all the way to the left. And then we do the same thing for our balance, but we don't want that on the left side. We want it on the right side. So that's why we float it to the right. Okay. If I actually save this right now and we go to our dApp, look at that. Okay. So now we see stake tokens on the left and our balance on the right, and they all exist within this card, right? They all exist within this card. So what do you think is going to happen if I actually remove this float to the right? What do you think is going to happen? I go back. Well, we see that the balance is no longer floating to the right. It's no longer going to attach itself to the right side of this card. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Hopefully you're seeing that. You could also see that the stake tokens is bold, right? Because we added bold. We moved it to the left. There's a bit of a margin. Hopefully you can see a little bit of a margin. It doesn't start right here. It starts over here. And the same thing with the balance. It also has a margin, which we can see when we bring back the float to the right. Okay, excellent. So hopefully the styling now is you're starting to understand why we're adding all this style. I know it doesn't look anything close to amazing right now, but these are just some foundations that we're these are just some foundations that we're laying. These are just some foundations that we're laying down right now so that we could get it to where we need it to be afterwards. Okay, and now under our span, what do we want to have? Well, underneath our stake tokens, actually, let's take a look here. Now that we have this set up, let's take a look together at visualizing what it is we want to add to complete this. And again, I'm not gonna go to the final version because I want you to use your imagination. I want you to visualize this. So underneath the stake tokens, what we want to have, right, is we want a text box and in that text box, you can put the amount that you want to stake, right? And over here with our balance, we want to be able to show the balance, right? So that's where the balance is going to go. But that we're going to use state to do. This, we could actually create a text box, and then and then the state from our React is going to react to whatever the input is. So we want a text box in here, and then underneath there, we want to have some buttons. We want to have a button that's going to deposit, if you remember, and then another button that's going to withdraw. Now, if this is really confusing or hard to imagine, you could always, of course, go back to the first video where I showed you what it is we're going to be building on the front end, like the completed version, and you can take a look at that and maybe that'll help. But I do encourage you to just bear with me and just build it one component at a time, because in the real world, that's how you would be doing this, right? You would be building it one piece at a time, or you'd be working in it with a team environment, and they would just be building those pieces one at a time as well. Okay, so we want to have a text input under. So we do div, we're going to have a class name, input group, and MB will be 4. Okay. And then we're going to bring in an input. And the input is our text box. And input has certain parameters now has certain properties that we can now bring in. So we can bring in the type of our input to be what? A text, right? Whoopsies, type. And we're going to have a placeholder. And that's what we put inside of the text. And then we're going to make it required. So that just means that it's required that you have to actually, that in order to submit, in order to submit your form, this input is required for you to fill it out. So let's save that. Let's take a look. And there it is. So now we have a text input. Awesome. So I can type in here anything I want, and I can delete, and it always goes back to the placeholder, 0. Now it doesn't do anything just yet, but at least we're building the skeleton. So very good. Okay, and this input, actually, we want to self-close it, right? So we're going to close it like this, since it's an input. We don't want to have an open input and a closed input. All right, now let's create some more divs underneath here, right? Because we need to have our buttons. So we're going to do another div underneath here, and we're going to do class name equals input grouped open, and we're going to add another div inside this div as well, because we're going to put an image in here, and this is going to be slightly different. What we're going to do is we're going to do input group text like that, and we're going to bring in our image source. We're going to bring in our tether image, which you can actually find. If you look down here, we should see a tether.png. There it is. So we're going to bring in this tether PNG over here so that we have the picture next to our USDT. So it's going to show the amount, and it's going to see it in USDT in our tether, and we're going to have the image that we're going to bring in. So it's going to look nice. And we can just add an alt. We can say tether. Sorry, the alt doesn't go there. The alt would go, of course, it's a property that goes in our image over here. Make sure to close the image. And here we can actually add some spacing. So NBPS, let's add a couple of these and write USDT. So that's where our tether USDT is. We're going to have to import this. So let's go up to the top and import tether from tether. Oops. we're going to have to get out of here. So we're going to go from here and then tether PNG. Okay, excellent. We can save that. Let's save that and take a look. Whoa, all right. So little issue over here. Size is very big. Let's fix that. Okay, so we're going to change the height here. So what are we going to do? We can just go, let's put the source first of all, because that looks better. Alt tether, and we can say height. Let's try 32. That's better. All right, this NBPS is not looking good. Sorry, it's and NBSP. I'm being a little dyslexic. Let's try that again. All right. Nice. Okay, so we have our stake tokens. We brought in our image, and it's set to USDT. Very good. All right, and now we're going to leave the input group here, and we're going to leave the second input group, and we're going to leave the third input group. And underneath here is where we're going to actually add another button, is where we're going to actually add our buttons. So let's do the first button. We do that just by bringing in a button like this. And we're going to have two buttons, right? So we're going to have one button for depositing and one button for withdrawing. So this can say deposit and this can say withdraw. And we know that when we deposit, we're staking, and when we withdraw, we unstake for our customers. And we're going to make this type a submit button. All right, so that's because we're going to have to submit this into the form. So that's why we make the type submit. Okay, so this essentially is going to submit the entire form. All right, and let's just add some styling, our favorite thing to do. I know, we're almost there. So for button, bootstrap, we can say button, button primary, we can do button large, and we can turn it into a block, button, block, okay. And actually, the withdraw button is not going to be in our submit form. It's going to be separate, right? We want to have separate functionality, so we're not going to put it into our form. We're going to put it after our form. So we'll just move it to outside of the form. Remember, this opens and this closes. All right, so let's do that. And this button is also going to have the same classes, the same style. So I'm going to copy the style for the withdraw button, the class name here, and I'm going to add it here. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how this is looking. So let's go back to our Firefox. Ooh, look at that. So now we have a deposit button and a withdraw button. Very nice. We've got our stake tokens. Now, of course, if we click on it, nothing's going to happen, except for because it is a submit button, it's going to be requiring for this input to be filled out. So if I do this and I hit submit, it's not going to do anything, right? It's actually going to kind of just crash and then restart because nothing's happening. And then we have our withdraw button, which does nothing, right? Because there's nothing. It's not going to do anything when we click on it. We actually see a response in the deposit because there is some state that's already built into the form. That's what's interesting about forms in React. So there is a reaction happening, but since it's not set up to the state essentially that we've created, it's not going to actually do anything, right? We did not tell it to do anything upon submit, but we are going to. We're getting there. We're getting there. We just have one more final addition to this form, one final addition to our main component, and we are done. So let's do that. So the final thing we're going to add is going to be our airdrop, right? So here for this airdrop, what we can do is just create one more div. And for the class name, we can just take what we've been doing, card body. Let's do text center. Let's do a style. Color is going to be blue. And we can just type in here airdrop like that for now. So let's go ahead and save that. And we see airdrop. And then eventually there's going to be a timer next to the airdrop so that after, if we want to stake over 50 tokens, this airdrop counter will go down. We'll build that out as well for bonus. And okay, there we go. So we have our cards set up. We have our staking balance, our reward balance. We have our stake tokens, which is in USDT. which is going to be done in Tether and USDT, and we have our balance. Okay, a couple things I just want to fix here. I realized that if we go back up here where we see border space, this should actually be border spacing. So let's change that. Okay, so that has nicer spacing now. And okay, that's good for now. It's not 100%, but it's very close to where we want it. We're going to add the animations later on, but we just wanted to give it enough kind of build right now so that we wanted to give it enough build right now so that we have the skeleton in place so we can add all of our inputs and our functionality afterwards. I always think it's best to write out the interface first, write out the skeleton, then add the functionality, and then add the functionality afterwards. So now that we have that component done, in the next video, let's get back to more fun stuff with JavaScript. Okay, I'll see you there.